Miep Gies, Anne Frank, and the Hiding Place by Barbara Lowell, illustrated by Valentina Toro. After the video, stay tuned for reading questions and activity ideas, and visit laurenmartinbooks.com for more free learning resources. Please like, share, and subscribe to Lauren Martin Books for more read-along stories. Now let's read Behind the Bookcase, Miep Gies, Anne Frank, and the Hiding Place. When the world was a very dark place, Miep Gies helped hide Anne Frank. World War II spread across Europe and into Africa. Nazi Germany occupied many countries, including the Netherlands, where Miep and the Frank family lived. The Nazis controlled the Dutch. They rationed food, making it harder and harder to buy. They threatened Dutch people. Anyone caught helping Jews would be thrown into prison or worse. The Nazis forced Jewish people to wear a yellow star on their coats that said Jude, the Dutch word for Jew. They stole the Dutch Jews' possessions, homes, and freedom. Miep worked for Otto Frank. He and his family were Jewish. Their lives had become unpredictable and dangerous under Nazi occupation. Mr. Frank called Miep into his office. He told her that he planned to hide his family in the empty rooms above the offices. He asked Miep for help. They both knew the danger if they were caught. Miep said yes without hesitating. Some of Mr. Frank's other employees, Mr. Kufus, Mr. Krahler, and his secretary, Ellie Vosen, would help too. Miep knew what war meant. World War I started when she was 5. Miep had lived in Vienna, Austria, with her parents in an old, dark apartment. The Austrians, along with the Germans, lost the war. Miep's family had little food. She grew weak and sick. She might have died, but the Dutch offered to care for Austria's children. Her parents sent her to the Netherlands when she was 11. Miep took a train to the Netherlands with other children. At the station in Leiden, the children sat in rows. Strings hung around their necks. Attached to the strings were cards in a language they could not read. A man approached Miep. He picked up her card and read. Ja, he said, and took Miep's hand. At his house, his wife, a woman with soft eyes, welcomed Miep. Their children, 4 boys and a girl, lived there too. Instead of calling her by her Austrian name, they gave her the Dutch name Miep and showed her how to butter bread and sprinkle chocolate pieces on top. They called the chocolate pieces hailstones and mice. Miep had never tasted anything so delicious. Miep learned to speak Dutch and moved to Amsterdam with her new foster family. When she grew up, she went to work for Mr. Frank. Where would World War II take the Frank family? Not long after Mr. Frank talked to Miep, his 16-year-old daughter, Margot, received a notice. The Nazis ordered her to report to a German labor camp. It was time for the Franks to go into hiding. Mr. Frank had not told his family where they would hide, but Miep knew. She led Margot to the office. They rode their bikes in the pouring rain. They were outlaws. Jews were forbidden to have bikes. Miep was forbidden to help Jewish people. But there were no police outside to stop them. The police stayed inside because of the rain. Soon, Mr. and Mrs. Frank and their 13-year-old daughter, Anne, appeared at the office door. They wore layers of soaking wet clothes because they could not be seen carrying suitcases. Miep helped them up the narrow stairs of the hiding place and closed the door behind them. Later, when no one would be in the office, Miep visited them. She was amazed to see boxes and sacks of food, pots and pans, and furniture scattered about. She had no idea when Mr. Frank had brought it all. Anne and Mr. Frank dashed around putting everything into place, but Mrs. Frank and Margot sat on a bed and seemed lost. Anne showed Miep the room she shared with Margot. She pasted pictures from her movie star collection on the walls and photos of Princess Elizabeth and Margaret, an enormous pink rose, babies, and a chimpanzee party. Miep thought it was just like Anne to make a room lovely. Miep visited the Franks every morning. Anne greeted Miep first and asked for the latest news. One morning, Miep told the family that the darkest days had come. The Nazis had rounded up many Jews and sent them away to labor in concentration camps. Anne asked about her friends, but Miep did not know. Trying to find out was dangerous. Without girlfriends to share secrets with, Anne wrote her secrets in the diary she called Kitty. More people joined the Franks in the hiding place, Mr. Van Daan and his wife, their son Peter, and Miep's dentist, Dr. Dussel. A bookcase was hung on hinges to conceal the door to the hiding place. Miep wanted to be available to all of them, but especially to Anne. She knew how it felt to be young and leave everything in your world behind. Miep listened to her concerns. She answered Anne's many questions. They talked about boys, fashion, and makeup, things Anne was curious about. Miep decided to buy something special for Anne. She searched all over Amsterdam before finding a pair of used red high heels. Anne slipped her feet inside and wobbled a bit at first, but soon she pranced back and forth across the floor. It was a small moment of happiness in their dark world. Anne asked if Miep and her husband, Henk, could spend the night. Henk worked for the Dutch resistance and would never reveal their secret. So one night, Miep and Henk stayed in the hiding place. The Westertoren church clock chimed every 15 minutes. Anne thought of the clock as a friend because it broke the silence, but Miep could not sleep listening to it chime. She began to feel the same fear her friends felt every day. The hours passed. In the morning, Miep knew how it felt to be a Jew in hiding. Miep and everyone in the hiding place lived from day to day, hoping that the war would soon end. It continued. Miep became like a hunter searching for food. Somehow she always found something for everyone to eat, even if it was half rotten. Everyone became thin. Their clothes were dirty from lack of soap. They were cold and little coal to burn that second winter. Would the war never end? Then June 6, 1944 brought real hope. D-Day. The Allied forces invaded Nazi-occupied France. Help was coming, but it seemed to take so long. One day, a Nazi officer entered the office. He told Mr. Frank's secretary, Ellie and Miep, to stay put and not to move. They were terrified. Someone had betrayed Anne and the others in hiding. Miep heard their footsteps coming down the stairs for the first time in 2 years. Then they were gone. Everything Miep and the others had done to keep them safe had failed. Henk appeared at the office door. He had seen the Franks and the Van Dans and Dr. Dussel taken away in a police truck. Ellie, Henk, and Miep hurried upstairs to save whatever they could. They knew the Nazis would return. Miep spotted Anne's diary on the floor. She did not open it. She did not let anyone read it. Miep kept the diary safe for Anne, but Anne did not return after the war ended. Of all the people in the hiding place, only Mr. Frank returned from the concentration camps. Miep gave him Anne's diary. It comforted him. When Mr. Frank published her diary, the world learned Anne's story. Miep was grateful that Anne's voice would still be heard. For many, Anne became the face of the Holocaust. In her diary, Anne wrote, I want to go on living even after my death. Because Miep saved her diary, Anne's voice lives on. She lives in the hearts of readers who will always remember her. I am not a hero. I stand at the end of the long, long line of good Dutch people who did what I did, or more. Never a day goes by that I do not think of what happened then. Miep Gies. Who did you learn about in this book? What are they famous and remembered for? What challenges, obstacles, or difficulties did they overcome? And how did they make the world a better place? What can you learn from them and their story? What can you do to make the world a better place in big ways and small everyday ways? What challenges might you need to overcome, and how can you overcome them with the help of others or with the help of your own determination and hard work? Write or draw what you learned about Miep Gies and Anne Frank in this book, and think about what you can learn from them about making the world a better place. You can also do research with the help of a family member to learn more about Anne Frank and Miep Gies, and more historical figures like them. Please like, share, and subscribe to Lauren Martin Books for more read-along stories. Visit laurenmartinbooks.com for more books and free learning resources. Thank you for reading with me.